Hi, and welcome to this training video on Google Analytics. My name is Sarah Orchard and I'm your trainer today. I am the creator of GetFullyBooked.com. I also run a tourism business myself. I run a luxury treehouse business, so I understand what it's like to run a tourism business from an operational point of view, but also from a marketing point of view. So today we're going to be looking at Google Analytics. So what is Google Analytics and why should you be using it? Well, Google Analytics is a free piece of code that yourself or your web developer can add to your website. What it does is it tracks all of the activity on your website in terms of traffic, where people come from, how long they spend on your website, what actions they take, what pages they visit. It's a really, really valuable tool for understanding how well your website is performing and converting, and also how well your marketing activity is doing. If you're spending a lot of time, for example, on social media, you need to understand whether it's actually bringing any business into your business. So Google Analytics is a very useful tool, and it is free. However, what comes out of the box with Google Analytics is not particularly meaningful from a reporting point of view. So I have created a custom dashboard. It's a report that can be emailed to yourself as a PDF on a monthly basis, because let's face it, we never get around to remembering to look at this sort of data on a monthly basis. So I'm going to show you how to create the report and also how to have that report emailed to you every month so that you don't forget to look at how well your website is doing and celebrate how well it's doing. So I've provided some custom code that you'll need to paste in to create this dashboard, and I'm now going to take you through how to do that. So when you log into Google Analytics, you will have already created your Google Analytics tracking code, which your web developer will have put on your website, and you need that to run for about a couple of months to get some meaningful data for you to look at. So then you log into Google Analytics and you paste in into the browser here the code that I gave you in the workbook. And this is the template that I have pre-created. So it'll ask you to select a view in terms of which website you want to look at. So you'll see your website address there. And basically you press the create button. And with the beauty of technology, it will then create the dashboard based on what I have designed. So this is my unique dashboard that I use when I work one-to-one with clients and review their marketing performance. And I find it really helpful because it is a one-pager that basically tells you the current sort of health of your website. You can find it under dashboards. It's there at the top. It'll be website performance dashboard. Okay, so to get started, the first thing is up in this top right-hand corner, you can pick a date range. So let's go back and look at October last year. You just select the dates and click apply. And it then fills the data in for that particular period. So you could look at a whole year, you could look at the last quarter, you could look at the last month's performance. You can also compare it to the previous period, which obviously would be the previous year or the previous month, depending on what you've got selected, or you can select year and apply that. That's really good when you're doing your sort of annual planning, because you can see a whole year's worth of data and can maybe compare it against last year. But what I do find is it does make the report quite busy. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to switch off that compare button. So I'm going to walk you through the two columns of the report and explain what each of the metrics are telling you, and also give you some pointers in terms of what to look out for. What's positive, what might be negative in terms of your website traffic. So if we start with the top of the left-hand column here, we've got the number of sessions. So this website's had nearly 72,000, which I think we'd all be really chuffed if our website had that many visits.
but it tells you how many unique or visitors sessions. This is not unique visitors, but it's actually number of total visits during that time period that you selected. Below that, you'll find a graph which you can interact with, and it shows you by the day of the month or whatever time period you've got, how many visits you got on that particular day. Now, this chart is really useful with a couple of things, really. It's useful to look at any seasonality or trends in your traffic across the month or across the year. You can see here on this particular example, there are dips at the weekends on Saturday and Sunday, and it's pretty consistent every weekend. So their peak day seems to be on a Tuesday. So if I was planning marketing activity, either I was sending email campaigns or I might be doing some Facebook activity, I would want to coordinate that with the busiest days on my website, because that's when your customers have the highest propensity to want to visit your website. So that can guide your marketing activity. Often find with tourism and hospitality businesses, that would be totally different to this graph, and probably find it would be a Friday might be your busiest day. That's pretty typical. And therefore you would want to schedule your activity on those days, and also probably work out the best time as well of day to send out your email campaign or send out your Facebook posts. And Facebook Insights can help with that as well. It also is really useful for looking at, if you've put a piece of activity in place, like an email campaign, maybe you wrote a blog post or you did do some Facebook advertising, you can actually see whether there are any spikes in traffic that correlate with when you were running a promotion or when you were actually putting marketing activity out there. So it helps you to work out whether it actually is correlating into website traffic, which is why you're doing it. Next on the report, we have new visitors. And as the name suggests, that just tells you what percentage of your traffic is new people who haven't been to your site before in that month. Google does actually track everyone by our IP addresses, so it knows where we live. It's a bit Big Brother. Only a little bit, but it actually knows whether you've been to the site before. So obviously you'd probably be wanting to see a high percentage of new visitors, but depending on your business, say you're a restaurant or a pub, you actually might want to see quite a high percentage of past visitors, existing visitors, because that means that your local audience, maybe your customer base, are actually coming back and looking at your site frequently and actually, coming back to your website, which is probably one of your key marketing objectives in terms of getting people to do repeat visits. Next on the chart, we have bounce rate. Now, bounce rate, as the name suggests, if you don't know what a bounce is, Google determines a bounce to be when someone has come from whether it was a Google search or maybe from another site, and they visited your website and they literally visited one page and they exited from the same page. So they're literally bouncing off of your website. Now, typically, bounce rates sit anywhere between sort of 30 and sort of 60%. Around about 50 to 60% is pretty typical of most types of businesses. I have seen bounce rates as low as 20%, which is brilliant. But I've also seen bounce rates as high as 80 or 90%. Now, if you start getting a bounce rate above, I'd say 75%, you need to look at whether you've got a problem with your website content. And are people bouncing because maybe they're not finding what they thought they were searching for? Or maybe they don't like the look of what they found. So you've got to then look at that bounce rate. I actually do have bounce rate on some of the other metrics as well, because again, it tells you whether you've got problems with particular elements of your content and traffic. So next on the report, we have average session duration, which again is pretty self-explanatory. It's telling you how long on average people spend on your site. Again, for the types of businesses that we're talking about, tourism, hospitality, experience-based businesses, we're probably looking at an average between 2 and 3 minutes per visit. So that shows you just how little time people spend on websites. If you had an e-commerce website, you may see that as high as 4 or 5 minutes, but very few websites have higher visit durations than that. And again, it just shows, people they want to find the content. You want it within 3 clicks of them finding you, and they want to get to their stuff quick. And if you put lots of stuff on there or they can't find what they're looking for, they will bounce and they won't hang around. The next metric here is pages per session. So again, this is the average number of pages that people look at on a visit. This site has got 3.82. Again, typically for tourism and hospitality type businesses, we're probably looking at an average between 2 and 3 pages per visit. Again, if you have an e-commerce site, or maybe you have a multiple holiday property website, or you're a restaurant or a pub and you're part of a chain, and therefore there might be several restaurants in your group, and therefore you might find that the pages per session would be a bit higher. E-commerce would probably be looking at about 5. And again, like I said, if you've got multiple properties within your portfolio, you might see that slightly higher. Then we've got the second to last graph on this first column, which is the visits by device type. Now, for this particular demo business, they're getting 71% of their traffic from desktop. Well, I can tell you now that for most of your businesses, this graph will look very different, and you'll probably find that it will be the converse, and actually sort of 60 to 70% of your traffic will be coming from mobile and tablet. And the reason this chart is in the report is it's really important to understand that so that you can deliver your content on your website for those users. So really important to test your website on basically on a number of different devices, and there are quite a few different platforms that you can use. There's also an extension within Chrome that allows you to interrogate your pages via different device types. And that's really important to make sure that, you know, content is accessible, because again, that could be affecting your bounce rate if people are finding a page, but actually on mobile, the content is really difficult to read, or they can't click on some of the links, and they basically get fed up and they'll go elsewhere. So knowing where your traffic comes from can influence how you present that data and that content on your website so that the user has the best possible experience. We've all been onto websites where it just doesn't work on a tablet. It might look beautiful on a desktop, but when you go onto a mobile device, it just doesn't work. And you don't hang around, you literally decide to leave because you've had enough clicking on things that don't work and not being able to find the content. So don't upset your customers, give them the best possible chance to find what they're looking for within those 3 clicks by making sure that your site is optimized for the device that they are using. Okay, so the last chart in the left-hand column is your top 10 website pages. So these are actually the pages on your website, and it will show you, normally the first one will be the / and maybe won't say home, but might just have the /, which is your index page, which is typically your home page, and will have probably the highest number of visits. Sometimes you can see pages in this element of the report that maybe you weren't expecting. But also there might be some that you were expecting that aren't there, and that then tells you that maybe that content isn't either performing as well as it should be from a search engine optimization point of view and being found in Google, or perhaps people aren't clicking on it when you're posting it on social platforms, etc. So it could be that your blog post that you wrote about dog-friendly walks from your holiday accommodation just isn't getting found, and yet you spent hours creating it. So again, this section of the report can just be really useful to tell you what content people are actually finding and how well it's performing, because some of this will be found through Google searches. It might not even be you actually actively marketing it and putting it out on a social platform or in your email campaigns. It will be being picked up by Google, but maybe it's not being found, or it could be being found in huge numbers, which will delight you. You may also find pages like your About page or your My Story or Our Story page could be doing really, really well. Typically, the About page is normally in the top 3 for most websites. So again, that can be very useful. You'll see in the, apart from the number of page views, we've got the bounce rate. So again, to my point earlier, If you have a particular page where the bounce rate is particularly high, so we've got one here, actually we've got one here at 55%, but if it was something like 70 or 80%, that could be telling me that that page is not really either being seen properly by people because of their mobile device, or it could be that the content isn't what they were expecting. And again, they're bouncing back out and not actually spending time on it. So that's quite important to look at the bounce rate by your pages, and it tells you how they're performing. So we're going to zoom back up to the top of the right-hand column for a little bit more of Google Analytics delight. So hopefully you're still awake. We've got website traffic sources. Now, this is a really important graph because it actually shows you where your website traffic is coming from, as it suggests. So we've got the big blue segment, dark blue segment here, which is organic search. So this is when people have gone into a search engine, which is about 80% of people use Google. It's what we all do these days. And it's not paid for. So this is the organic search, natural search results that come back based on how well you've optimized your web pages, and also lots of other SEO factors, which I no doubt will talk about at a later date. And you basically will see how much traffic you're getting from organic search. Now, for most businesses, you would like this to be as large as possible because this is free. And it means that your website is performing well in search. Then we have the dark green segment here, which is called direct. Now, direct, again, as the name suggests, this is when people have not gone via a Google search. So they have found you because they have either bookmarked your website because they thought it looked good and they wanted to come back to it, or maybe they already know the URL. Now, if you're a local pub or restaurant, you may find that people know you, and therefore they would type your URL directly into a browser because they know what it is, or so they wouldn't be going via search. The next biggest section, the orange segment here, is referral. And again, this is indicating the traffic that comes from third-party websites, so a referring site. So this could be your social accounts, a LinkedIn profile. It could be where you've paid to advertise on a local listing site. It might be your local tourism board site. It's basically another third-party website. It could also be something like The Guardian or The Times if you've done some PR and you've had a feature or a write-up somewhere. So obviously referral traffic is free traffic, and it's good to see where that business is coming from, particularly if you've paid for any type of advertising on these sites, to actually see whether they're working and whether your membership of your tourist board is actually working for you as well. Is your listing getting traffic? Now that could be because your listing could be improved, or it could be that their site isn't just generating traffic for you, but often it's generating more traffic than most businesses realize. So this is why this element of the report is really useful. And a bit further down, I've got a section that actually looks at the referral links themselves. So again, you can see individually whether they've actually driven some traffic. Now on this pie chart, you'll also have paid search, social media activity, and if you're doing email campaigns, you will see here under email marketing as well. So if you're doing emails, it's important to know that they're working, and they will show up in this report. Now we're going to look at this little section here called keywords. So these are the keywords that people would be typically typing into Google, which has then led them to find your site. Now, one caveat I would say about this section of the report, I've left it in here, but it's actually, you'll see a lot of not provided or not set, and that's basically a Google tracking issue, mainly because Google switched off this element within the report because people were using keyword stuffing and using the keywords to falsify their pages and their metadata in their pages, and therefore Google sort of in its wisdom switched it off. However, you can actually find the search queries over here. So if you go to this acquisition tab and you click on Search Console, if you've activated Search Console, and you can Google how to do that, under queries here, this section here, queries, you'll get all of the search queries that people have used to find your website. And that's really, really useful in a number of ways, because you can use it for actually thinking about have you got the right metadata on your website and how well your pages are performing. But also, you know, sometimes search queries can also be things that you could write about. So dog-friendly accommodation. You could then decide to write a blog post about that and things for people to do with their dogs locally, which would actually make sure that you're even more strong for that in the search results. So that's a really, really useful section that you can dip into and probably lose hours looking at. Next on the chart, we have top 10 social traffic sources. So again, if you're spending a lot of time on social media, which most of us do these days, useful to see which sites are generating your traffic. And also, if you're spending 2 hours a day on Twitter, and you find that Twitter, in this example, it's got 776 visits, but say that said 5 visits and you're spending 2 hours a day on Twitter, I'd have to question whether that's the best investment of your marketing time. So again, this chart can be a bit of a revelation for clients, because they can look at it and go, actually, I'm doing a lot of activity on, say, Instagram, but Instagram's not working for me. So then we need to question, can we improve what we're doing on Instagram? Or maybe Instagram isn't the place where your customer base, your ideal customers are. So maybe you should divert your attention to Facebook or to Pinterest or to another social site, or focus just on one site that's doing better for you. Like I often find Facebook might be doing better for clients, so therefore, particularly for tourism and hospitality businesses, and therefore it'd be better to spend more of your time on Facebook. Also, this is where bounce rate comes in. So on this Twitter example, if your bounce rate was, say, 70 or 80%, but on Facebook it's only 59, again, that tells you that you'd probably be better off spending more time on Facebook than on Twitter. And you can actually also set up in analytics some goals so that you can track if you've got, say, like a table booking page or a final, maybe you've got an availability calendar for your holiday accommodation, or you've got an e-commerce sort of checkout page where people book and you get a booking confirmation for your accommodation. If you set that as a goal within analytics, you can actually track all the way through to see whether people actually did what you wanted them to do, which is actually to book a table for dinner or to book a spa visit or to come and stay in your holiday cottage. So you can actually track that all the way through depending on how your website is constructed. So this table here on social traffic can be really, really, really useful in terms of, because it is probably one of our main marketing tools that we're all using these days, and actually whether it's actually generating any return on your investment from a time point of view. Now, the very last chart in the column here is the top 10 referring sites. So I mentioned referral traffic in that pie chart on the top of this column, if you remember. So as I said, this is where you can see whether any of your listings that you are paying for, such as your tourism board, or say something like Cool Stays or Cool Camping, or a restaurant directory for your city or town, the Good Pub Guide, whatever it is, you know, you're paying to be listed. Are they actually driving traffic through to you? So you would see the names of the organizations and their website addresses, and it will show you how many visits you've had. So again, you can evaluate, say, looking on an annual basis, whether it's worth renewing that membership or that advertising fee for the year. And again, don't forget to look at bounce rate to see whether the quality of that traffic is good and whether they're hanging around or whether they're all disappearing in droves. So like this one down here where it's 78%, you would then question maybe whether that was worth paying for that advertising listing. Again, if you've got, as I said, goals set up, you can see whether they've actually booked, which is even more meaningful, but takes a little bit more work to set up. And you do that under the conversions tab over here. Goals, you can set your goals for your actual report. So it's conversions and goals. Okay, so that is a really useful, hopefully, report. Hopefully quite visually quite interesting to look at and not too boring. And for most people, they find it really enlightening in terms of their website and how it's doing. There's a couple of things I just want to show you how to do as well, because it makes life even easier, which is you can export this report as a PDF. So you can send it to yourself, or you can send it to a colleague or to your web agency, or whoever you want to share it with, your granny. It's entirely up to you. But the more important thing is you can actually email this report to yourself on a frequency that you decide. So let's fill in the to button. So we're going to send it to our mystery company. And I'm going to call it Website Performance Dashboard. You can change that subject if you want to flag it that it's your monthly report. It's going to come to you as a PDF. I would suggest that you want to get it on a monthly basis, and you can determine, most people have it on the first of the month. You could have it more frequently. Say you're a restaurant, you might want it on a weekly basis, but you're very unlikely to want it on a daily basis unless you're very bored. And you can type in a little message here, and then you basically click on the send button. And what that has now done is that has set up a scheduled email so that it actually comes to you every month on the first of the month as a PDF. So you'll see this report. You won't be able to interact with it like we've done on the screen, but you can log back into your analytics to do that if you see any bits of data that suddenly excite you and you want to look at in more detail. And I just want to show you where those emails live. So if you go to admin and you scroll down to the right hand side here, you'll see there's a little button called scheduled emails. And you'll see that the Website Performance Dashboard is set up to come on the first of the month to the email address that we selected. It only runs for 6 months. I always extend it to make it a year, because otherwise you forget to do it. And the beauty of this is that it does just come through to you automatically, so you don't have to remember, which makes life a lot easier, because let's face it, we don't wake up in the morning and think, oh, we must go and look at Google Analytics. However, if it comes to you every month as a report, it makes life really, really easy. So that's the end of my Google Analytics tutorial. I hope you found it useful, and just a reminder that you can find your report under dashboards, under customization, and that's where it will live, and it will be there forever until you delete it up here if you decide that you don't want to use it or look at it anymore. So I hope that's been useful. Thanks for listening.